Alrighty, so I've got my early leader tier list for Secrets of Power here. I like doing this pretty early on after all of them are revealed, just so I can give you my early impressions on them, kind of rank them, have some fun with this. So yeah, that's what I'm going to get to. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel, helps out a ton. And if you're interested in some more content from me, which will include brews for a lot of these new leaders, do check out my Patreon as well. All right, so I'm going to discuss all the new leaders, 18 of them. So everyone is going to get some conversation, whether or not they start in the lower tiers or the higher tiers. I do talk about all of them. I kind of give you ideas of what you can do with them, how you can build with them, how good I think they will be in competitive play, and also how interesting are they, right? Some leaders maybe are kind of bland or have very generic abilities that we've seen before, and some can provoke much more interesting build-arounds. This is for fun. I even make my tiers kind of different. I name them to be a little like more fun in my mind. I have tier no, tier unlikely, tier maybe, tier probably, and tier yes, a tier that has very frequently been empty. So we will see here if any leaders make it into that one. And yeah, like, keep in mind, this tier list isn't just like a predicted order of finish for how good these leaders are going to be. It takes account power ceiling and power floor, but also like interest level, my interest level in actually working with them, what I think they can kind of do maybe long term. So it's not just like I'm ranking 1 through 18 best to worst. And of course, I will talk a little bit about how they might fit into an existing metagame. So let's get to it. Tier no, right here, we got 5 leaders, and we're going to start with Governor Pryce. There's major issues with this leader. We can start with the deploy cost and the stats. 6 cost, 4, 6. This is something that is going to be complained about with other leaders in this video as well, including one that you can see on this screen right now. It is not a good enough stat line for a 6 deployed leader. That is a 5 cost deployed leader stat line, and it still doesn't make much sense to me that we get so many leaders that are understated at 6. But it's a major knock. I know the unit can get buffed, but you see here, it only gets buffed when you have ready friendly token units, and that's a big restriction too. They have to be ready, which means if you have tokens, you can't use them as action churning to kind of protect her. You have to keep them ready if you want her to be buffed. The token that she makes on her attack doesn't buff her. Any mass token producers that you might do that turn, such as like Chancellor Palpatine, plot card, which puts 2 into play, they won't buff her. And for a kind of leader that I think is looking to be like a major puncher, like a couple attacks and close out a game, that first turn where you flip her is often not going to amount to much. On her leader side, 1 cost to ready a token unit doesn't feel that impactful to me either. Token units are notably really weak. Like, the best ones are like these spies, or there's like the 2/2 clones if you somehow fit ways to make them. You have TIE fighters. Whatever it is, spending 1 to ready them isn't a huge thing to be doing unless maybe you've upgraded those tokens, but upgraded tokens run huge risks to all sorts of interaction. So overall, I think it's actually like a pretty interesting leader, but I do not see really an avenue for much competitiveness out of Governor Pryce. And we got a red hero also, and this is Luthen, and you know, I don't think he's bad, but I just don't think he's going to be any better than other red heroes we have, including one in this set. All your units can kind of sort of trade up in damage, right? Because when they attack and die, they deal an extra 1. This can be trending a little more aggro, since that damage can go to the base, and it also only happens when you're attacking, but has no way to like combat people attacking into your units. And if you want to really dig into this ability, you need ways to like self-kill your units, like heroic sacrifice, of course, and other kinds of things, but those are all like negative board effects. So to want to use cards like that, you need to be able to close out games pretty quickly to like make up for the fact that you're going to be at board disadvantage or card disadvantage because you're relying on losing your units to push extra damage. And here's the bigger problem, he flips into a 2-7. So that doesn't really gel with the rest of this very well. 2-7 is not a good stat line. I know he has a lot of health, but 2 power is nothing. Now, of course, you can plot and upgrade him, but that goes for any leader you might build around. So nothing particularly special about doing it with Luthen. His ability does get boosted when he's in play, which is nice. And there's cool gimmicks that you can do with this. I don't think he's bad. Like, he's not in here because I think he's the worst leader. I think he's in this tier because I just don't think he's going to be any better than leaders that exist that fill very similar red heroic shells, like Sabine, like Han 2, like the Cassian leader, which will show up on a later page here. So that's what knocks him down a peg, is just the general strategy. I don't think it's giving him anything special in comparison to a lot of these other leaders that exist in the color. Next up, C-3PO, who might actually be the worst leader in the entire set. A very bad leader side ability. 1 cost to exhaust a unit would be kind of decent if it didn't require you to control an exhausted unit, which makes it a really, really clunky ability, because the best use case for this is to start a turn with initiative and use it, but you can't because all your units will be ready. So your opponent always gets to do something with their best unit no matter what. So it's not a good ability. He's a 4 flip. He's a 1-6. What is that stat line? I get it. He gets 6 health. You can play Babu Frick with this guy. That's not going to amount to much, in my opinion. It'll be cool, and then the few games you draw Babu Frick and your opponent doesn't immediately kill it, but basically every other game, this leader doesn't do much. It still has that restriction on its attack. You have to control another exhausted unit, which means C-3PO can't be the first unit to attack that turn. 1 power. This is basically a blank unit. It doesn't do anything. I don't see much here. There's just better 4 flip leaders in my mind. Maybe I will be very wrong, and Babu Frick aggro will crush us all. I just don't see it yet. And next up, I got to talk about DJ, who does make my tier no, even though I got to preview some cards that interacted well with him. The main knock on this is just the aspect penalty that you get by being a double yellow leader and not getting heroic or villainy. It is an absolute tremendous cost. Basically, in my mind, an unbearable one. All the best cards in the game, for the most part, are heroic or villainy. You get to play double yellow with red or double yellow with blue or whatever else you might want to try, but you don't get to fill your deck with the most powerful cards in the game, because you're sacrificing all of that just to be able to play 2 to 3 to 4 double yellow cards and then maybe splash a couple cards in another color. So that is a major downside, like one of the biggest downsides, actually, like very similar, maybe even more of a downside than something like Revan and Anakin were in the previous set, who were just heroic or villainy. So keep that in mind. The second issue is the 6 flip 4/6 leader, just like with Governor Price. It's not okay. It's really, really bad stats, especially for a leader that you might want to combo with on his flip, so that he can like flip and then maybe you can rescue a bunch of your units, but he has to survive for any of that to happen. And well, at 6 flip 4/6, that is less likely to happen than for most leaders. He is really interesting. He's actually one of the most interesting leaders we've had in the game. There's really cool things you can do with him, with like getting good when played units down early, get their triggers, and then hide them under something else. Of course, you need to be able to pressure at the same time, because it's a very tempo negative play to play like Cantina Bouncer for 4, right? You just played Waylay more expensive and you didn't put anything into play, right? It's hiding under something else. So you have to be able to force your opponent to interact with you to free those units so that you actually get a benefit, right? And when they get released, if it's a turn later, they come in exhausted, so it's not like they get to immediately attack, right? That only happens on that DJ flip turn. There's cool little interactions. I think a really good one is like with Lando, the blue card, which you basically get no downside off that Lando self-capture. Of course, Libertine. If you could open Libertine in every hand, in every game, Certainly, the power level of this deck rises tremendously because that's a really big play to make on turn 2. But overall, it's sort of like a pseudo aggro deck, but that is also playing kind of board tempo negative a lot of the time because it's not actually deploying units. It's deploying effects and hoping that it can kind of get those units out with other gimmicky cards, either self-bounce effects like New Adventure, and like Evacuate or whatever it might be. Another good card, one of the best, is Pirated Starfighter, where you can play it on turn 1 if you have a 1-drop with no downside, which is really cool. There are a lot of gimmicks. It's just mostly that. It's mostly gimmicks. And the last one in tier no is Satine. And well, if the only thing you'll ever play against are decks that ignore board and go face, you probably could be happy to run this, but unfortunately that's not everything everyone will play, and the moment you play against a deck that actually wants to kill your units, you do nothing because you have a 5-flip leader that has no power, and is just basically blank text if your opponent isn't actively trying to delete your base from existence. So against control, you don't have a leader. Against mid-range decks like Rey or Anakin, don't really have a leader. So yeah, it's cool. Her leader ability is actually decently strong. Healing 2 from a unit. This is, of course, really good against any decks trying to, like, ping Tarkin Town. You can prevent that. You can create sometimes interesting value trades, put damage on your base to make, and then your leader will actually flip, and like you always get like 4 restore off of her, sometimes even 8, just because she's hard to kill. But you do typically just get overrun unit wise because, again, other decks are flipping leaders that actually kill things, and you flipped an 08. So yeah, like as a sort of like spike deck, if you expect every deck is like a pilot aggro deck or a burn deck or hard aggro ground that tries to ignore, sure, it's like kind of, you can think of it kind of as like a counter deck. I'm not even sure it's going to be favored in all those matchups, quite frankly, because again, you're still flipping a 0-8 that can't kill anything, but as sort of like a passive heal for every turn effect, that's interesting. But yeah, overall, I don't think we're going to be seeing much Satine at top tables. All right, so next up we have Tier Unlikely, also with 5 new leaders, and the first one I'll talk about is Lammasu. Now, he's got another major issue, similar to these 4/6s for 6 deploy. Now we've got a 6-cost 3/7. That's a 5-cost leader deploy stat line, and you get it at 6. Again, I just need these numbers to be higher for these 6 deploys. We have not seen a single 6 deploy leader that wasn't like very competitively statted outside of Rey be competitively viable. And Rey, you know, I'm not going to do a full Rey thing, but Restore 3 is worth in like so much that somehow she was able to like elevate past her poor stats. But Lammasu, I don't think is going to get elevated past his poor stats. He's got this action that you make upgrades cheaper, and then they damage the unit. There's not a ton of synergy with that damage, actually. There's a few units with grit that you can play. There's, of course, that 2-drop Zam Wexel, I think, that you can put upgrades on to like get extra value out of that damage. But for the most part, the damage isn't that helpful. Putting upgrades on units is always incredibly risky. It's something that's reserved primarily for leaders in this game. There's not a ton of times we like slamming upgrades on early units. Now, getting a discount is nice. The best one is probably Craving Power, where you can play it for 4. That's probably like the biggest get this has. You can't even like get a discount on Condemn, the new upgrade, which is like removal, because you only get that discount when you play it on your own units. So, you know, it's a decent ability. It's not like a bad ability, but resource cheating, at least pre-rotation, has been a lot more powerful than like very narrow effects with like some pseudo downside built into them. As a unit, the main issue here is that it has to complete the attack before you get to bring an upgrade back, which means if you attach it to Lammasu, that you don't actually get the benefit of the stat boost for the attack. That's pretty major. You also can't play upgrades from your hand anymore. It's only from the discard pile when you do this attack. So it's like, eh. And like, you still have to pay for it. It's just one less. I don't think the package here is particularly great or that interesting, honestly. I don't love jamming a bunch of upgrades in a deck. You know, unless you get way more value from them, like Kylo. And the funny thing here is this is a sandwich between two competitive blue villain leaders from the previous set. One is Talzin, who has the same stat line for one cheaper deploy, and one is Kylo, who is one more expensive and also has heavy synergy with upgrades, but does something way more explosive. So, don't know where Lama Su fits in. We got Leia here. I'll start with, I'm just not that interested with another leader that pays 1 to put an experience token on something. We have so many of them. This is in the same color as Rey as well, which is like, okay, now I guess in forever, at least for the next 4 months, not forever, they will have to be compared to one another. And I don't think Leia is any better than Rey. There is some better parts of it, right? Which is that you can continue to stack experience tokens on the same units, and that the leader has better stats than Rey, but does she actually? Because Restore 3 is like a major reason that Rey has become competitive. It's just how much she's able to mitigate early damage. Leia also has some clunkiness in this ability because any dual aspect card, like a Heroism blue card that you will disclose with, will no longer be able to put experience tokens on any Heroism cards in play, even if they are green or red or yellow, whatever color you're playing. So it does, a deck build tends to need to include more single aspect cards so that you can more efficiently splash that experience around. It's not a bad ability. It's just like not interesting. This is probably like the least interesting new leader just because we've seen this ability on so many other leaders, including Villainous, right? We have Snoke, we have Tarkin. It's just everywhere. They all have like their own flavor, but they all essentially do a very similar thing. And yeah, like Leia ends up in this tier because right now, if I'm playing blue hero experience giver, it's just gonna be Rey. I don't think Leia will be better. We got Jabba the Hutt here, another blue villainous, and this is a tale of two stories. We'll start with the good story this time. The unit side is quite powerful. So 2-8, the 2's not great, but 8 is a pretty nice break point, and the benefit is that Jabba sticks around, and because his ability is only activated once per turn, you really need him to stick around for a few turns to get value off of it. But boy, can you get a lot of value off of this ability, especially with ambush units that ambush and survive, because you can potentially kill 2 units with those ambush units. Any damage they take, they can also shoot at any other unit, including cross arena. So that's really nice. His leader isn't going to be putting much pressure, which again forces you into sort of this like blue villain controlling shell. You're not going to really be able to play aggressively or even like that mid-rangey. You're just going to be playing like another flavor of a Kira deck or whatever else it's going to be, with just a different way to bridge your mid game to the blue villainy late game. And in this case, it's with effective onboard trades with ideally high health units that can soak up and not die, because any units you have in play when this guy's out kind of double dip into their trading equity. Now let's go to the negative, and it's the leader side. This is a really bad ability overall. We see abilities that deal 1 damage come for free on tons of leaders, including one in this set. They don't typically need to cost 1, and when they do, they aren't good, like Mace Windu's deal 1, right? Mace Windu has a very similar ability here, where it's like if you meet a certain criteria, you then deal the extra point of damage, and that Jabba does do that, and that's why this ability costs 1, I guess, because it can end up dealing 2, but most of the time it's not. It's not very often that this ability is going to trigger at all in a game. We don't end up in board situations that frequently where units in play have 3 or more damage on them. It's just not really how the game transitions. So I expect this ability will be used very infrequently in game. And, you know, it also has the restriction. You can't even use it unless you have damage on one of your own units. I wouldn't worry too much about building around this. There are like self-damage units in this game. I just don't think it's gonna matter that much that you need to build around this ability. You'll get some maybe incidental value off of this sometimes, where you're able to like squeak a point of damage in your curve when you didn't have anything else to do. But overall, this falls probably pretty similar to like what I said about Luthen, is that I just think there's better ways to play blue villain control than Jabba. I don't think he's offering enough new stuff here. Yes, his ambush turns on like his flip turn and maybe the turn after while he's in play are going to be more powerful, but a lot of the other stuff will be weaker. I don't know if that trade-off is going to be worth it, right? And because of that, I'm kind of starting pretty low on him now. Next is Yularen, and this is funny that he's right under Leia in this preview, not because of this Leia, but because of the previous Leia from set 1. They have very similar abilities. This action cheating ability where you get to attack with 2 units at once. In this case, it's not trait dependent, it's cost dependent. It's a fine ability, but I really don't think it's that special, honestly. Leia was never a particularly impressive leader in competitive play. I think Yularen will end up in like an average tier. Like, I actually, again, I don't think he will be one of the like 5 worst leaders in the game, but I also don't think he has much of a shot in being greatly competitive currently. The best things he does is be a 4-flip leader that can play overwhelming, 5-flip leader with 4 power that can play overwhelming barrage. That's pretty powerful. The action cheating is nice. Helps you sometimes win races, especially when everyone is just trying to go base. And if that's like the world we live in, maybe he can squeak in as like sort of this ground-based aggro deck that can actually outrace. But again, this is going to be a deck that will get hindered a lot by interaction because it's going to be more difficult for him to stick a board. You can try going really wide, maybe with like double green. I think there'll probably be better versions for like double green go wide aggro, whether they're in this set like Mon or Bale. So yeah, like Yularen, he's not very interesting to me. It's like a very generic ability. There's not much to build around here. It's not like, oh, okay, they have to cost 1 less than one another. Okay, well, I guess we're curving like we do in a normal deck, and we can use his ability. Like, there's not much else here that I think is particularly spicy. And last here will be Sly Moore, and I'll say one really positive thing about this leader is I think be very good in limited. Maybe the best villainous limited leader. But as a constructed leader, paying 1 to make a 0/2 raid 2 with a bunch of restriction is not that enticing to me. The leader unit is pretty strong, right? It kind of attacks for 5, but you can split that damage up sometimes, and that's pretty good. It does come with the fact that it's a little understated. It does not get the magic 3/7 stat line. It's a 3/6. It's not even a 4/6. So it's a little understated. It gets this powerful ability, but I don't see a lot of like cohesion with this leader. There's not much synergy. Like the unit side has nothing to do with going wide with tokens. It doesn't help them at all. Like the only cohesion here is that your opponent needs exhausted units, which is like, okay, what you will need when you're playing with Sly's leader ability to make tokens, but there's always exhausted units, right? Your opponent's always attacking. Like Sly is not gonna ever not have something to deal 2 damage to unless some weird stuff is happening. So a little understated, a leader ability I don't think is particularly competitive, kind of leaves it in this murky, like not terrible place, but not one that I think will be that great. So now we move into tier maybe, and this is where I think things get maybe a little more interesting. I see definitely more potential in a lot of these leaders, either more power, more interesting build arounds, things like that. But let's start with the green ones. We'll go with Mon Mothma first. Now, let's start with the weak this time. I actually don't think like the leader ability is very good. Like being able to play a bunch of officials. Honestly, the main draw to that is that you get to play the Chancellor Palpatine double yellow card. in this deck. I think a lot of the other like splash officials that you would play in other colors are fine. Like they're not bad. It's just not a huge get. You can typically fill out a curve without it, but that Chancellor is quite nice, especially if you're trying to go wide or play with tokens and things like that. Her leader, she's a 3/7, so good rate. She definitely ticks that box. The official synergy with her unit side that buffs all the health is, it's pretty good. It's more annoying than it might actually look like when you first read it, because, all those trades that may have been able to happen, a lot of them can't happen anymore while she's in play. Where do I see a deck like this potentially working is mostly with like a mono green shell, right? If you want to get a benefit from her leader being able to play off aspect, then you might as well dig into some of the powerful double green cards. Unity of Purpose comes to mind. I think this is just a better shell than Rex was for like a go wide combo deck. You also get things like Command, of course. Oppo Rancisis is a pretty good 3-drop, especially if you play units with like Restore or Raid. Notably, the Spies all have Raid. The floor here isn't bad just because you're getting a really powerful statted leader and like a shell of powerful on curve units to play. I don't know if a deck, like, even though a deck like this has certainly gotten powered up in this set, I still don't know if it's going to be good enough once the dust settles. It's a very linear style build. It's like unit, go wide, aggro combo. I don't see much else to do with this leader besides that. So it's hard to judge right now, but once everything kind of settles down, we'll see if a deck like this can survive or not. And next is Bail Organa. If DJ wasn't the most unique leader of the set, it certainly is Bail. We got our second leader in the game now that can endlessly flip. It's not an epic action. This comes with a pretty heavy cost of discarding 2 cards, but it doesn't cost any resources to flip, unlike Trench did. So it's vastly better than Trench could be. And you can mitigate this card disadvantage pretty easily now because Plot is such a good mechanic with Bail, and you get to just dip into that every time you flip. So yes, you're discarding 2 cards, but you're also playing 1 or 2 cards from your resource row when you flip him, so you kind of made up all that disadvantage. Throw in the fact that he works pretty well with a couple of bases that we haven't seen get much play. One is Droid Manufactory in double green, where you get those tokens every time you flip, and the other is Shadow Collective Camp in red, where you get to draw a card every time you flip, so you can get a lot of value there. His leader ability is also pretty strong. It's a 1-cost draw a card, essentially. The nuance here is that you're drawing it from your resource row, and a unit has to die first, but it's a mostly easier restriction than it could be with other 1-cost draw effects that we've seen. Not all of them, but some of them. Some weaknesses here, of course. He starts as a really weak unit, as 3/3, so you really do often need to plot some kind of upgrade onto him, or he gets freely removed from the board, which, is not the end of the world, because then you can do it all again. Another weakness here is that his leader ability and his deploy both require an exhaust, so you can't ever do both in the same turn, so it's really kind of difficult sometimes to decide which you should do. A really nice synergy if you're going to try to grind with this leader, of course, is that you get to play Spark of Hope out of your resource row. You've basically turned it into a resupply whenever any of your units die. You don't have to keep it in your hand and wait for one of your units to die. You just know when you can do it. And you also get to bury a bunch of your top end into your resource row, think your home ones and whatever it might be, knowing that you'll be able to draw them once the game progresses later with his ability. So that's nice if you're trying to grind. Currently, I think he probably fits still more into an aggro shell, whether it's, again, a mono green deck that goes wide with tokens, with or without Unity of Purpose. Both could work, with or without Droid Manufactory even. I'm not sure 24 health, even with the constant stream of droids, is worth it, because I see a potential for a very aggressive meta where even though you can get tons of value out of Bale's ability, games are just going to end too quickly for you to capitalize on that value, and 24 health is very little. But yeah, mono green. With red, you get some nice stuff as well. The base I mentioned, but you get some really aggressive units that you can play with Bale. And yeah, remember your plot stuff. And most of the good ones are in green. And I didn't even mention it for Mon Mothma, but Chancellor Palpatine, the villain unit, it's actually a pretty good unit to play for 5 as well. You can make tons of board presence with Bale, especially if you're playing with the token base, but even without it, and Mon Mothma as well, you just get lots of units when she flips. So even though you're spending 5 for him, it still works pretty well. But yeah, like you want a lot of plot. You want probably skew aggro, but I could see maybe a blue grindy shell working as well with this kind of deck. Just you're capitalizing on his value sort of differently there. You want to generate as much card advantage with your flips, and of course with his leader ability. But these are both pretty cool heroic green leaders. I think Bale is of course really interesting. Mon, I don't find her leader particularly interesting. It's just another one of these, like, you can splash all your cards. I just think they statted her competitively enough, unlike Hera and like I think there was the Namase. I'm trying to remember what leader that was, the 4-cost one. But when you stat the leader appropriately, it gets a lot better. Now we'll go into the heroic cunning leaders. I'll start with Padme Amidala. There's some really good stuff going on with this. There's a lot of really good early plays that can easily trigger her ability. There's R2-D2 from Twilight, Bail Organa from this set, as well as Warrior of Clan Ordo and Nemik or Karis Nemik. They all have disclose. Some of it's on attack, one of them's when defeated, some are when they play. There's, of course, Faith in Your Friends, the one that requires you to disclose 3 yellow and 2 heroic. But if you skew this deck maybe over 60 to 70% cunning, probably closer to 70, you can reliably trigger it on turn 1 if you just resource appropriately, because you also do get to filter with it first. So you get a lot of ways to trigger this effect. And then, of course, the natural home for a pinging leader is Tarkin Town, and that's probably where Padme will see play if she is successful, at least while Tarkin Town exists. Although there are some good green disclose cards as well. It's just that ping effect is so much more potent when you get a free kill with that Tarkin Town. Where might she falter a little bit? She is a 6 deploy. Now, she statted well enough, I would say, 3-8. It's, of course, better than 3-7. The issue here is that it is a little slow, right? She's not getting more power, and this kind of color combination, red, yellow, is going to need to be an aggressive tempo style deck. There's not much you'll be able to do in grindy matchups outside of your smuggle cards. It's a nickel and dime sort of strategy where you try to get board control with the ability and effective units early game, and you try to close the door with smuggle and, pumps and stuff like that. So she's coming out a little late with only 3 power, but you can, she's a good host for plot upgrades that you might want to play. She also has some synergy with the Rey unit, the 5-cost Rey unit, that when you draw it outside of your normal draw step, you get to deal 2, mainly because this leader works well with R2-D2 and Faith in Your Friends, which are both cards that let you filter some of the top of your deck. So you're more likely to find that Rey, and then you can get like a 2 damage plus 1 damage from the disclose on those cards, which works pretty nicely. I don't think you're going to be triggering her ability multiple times too often when she's a unit. The disclose cards, there aren't actually a ton of them. They're mostly early in the curve as well. So it's not always like you don't really want to play R2-D2 on your 6 resource turn most of the time and things like that. And then the reason she's in tier maybe, it's kind of the big elephant in the room, is like, is this better than Quinlan? They will share a large majority of cards if they're both playing yellow, red. They're both pinging leaders. The main difference will be the turn 1 plays, where Padme will play all the cards I mentioned with Disclose, and Quinlan doesn't really do any of that. He'll just play like the best on-rate units he can find early in the game. But they are both a tempo style deck, and Quinlan just flips a turn earlier, which is huge. Do not forget that. I think Padme is going to see a lot of play, especially early in testing, because it's like the new thing and it's exciting, and you get to play some new cards that work really well with her and no one else. I didn't even mention the Anakin unit that she gets from the starter set, I believe. But when push comes to shove, you're gonna have to ask yourself, and you're gonna have to play some Quinlan too, but you're gonna have to ask yourself, is this actually better than me just going back to the 5-cost deploy leader who does a very similar build, and who also frankly got a lot of upgrades in this set, because there's some really powerful red cards in this set that work well with Quinlan and Padme. And he lost Force Throw, which almost removed him from the meta, but he's getting new upgrades, and he still has a very high floor, being a 3/7/5 deployed leader with a Tarkin Town base. So Padme, there's a lot of exciting stuff here. Worst case scenario, she won't be as good as Quinlan for the next 4 months, and then we'll have to reevaluate the leader entirely once Tarkin Town rotates, because all of a sudden all these ping leaders that kind of utilize that primarily will have to find other builds or just not be good enough anymore. But we'll see with Padme. Do think there's a chance that she'll be good enough for competitive play. Sabe is the next one, and I think this leader is worse than most people think. I'm gonna go on a limb there. I don't think the leader side ability is particularly strong. I see this getting played. I've tried it. I don't think looking at the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck and discarding one of them is all that much value. In fact, the worst part about it is that sometimes it's actually hurting you, because you don't want to discard either of the cards, but you have to once you decide to trigger. And that's a huge downside. Do not forget how big of a downside that is, that it is not a may. It says when a friendly unit deals combat damage at base, you may exhaust this leader. That part's a may, but once you choose to look at the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck, it is not a may anymore, and so often you are going to actually end up helping your opponent with this ability, because, yeah, they have 2 cards. Neither of them are Overwhelming Barrage. I guess I'm drawing them one closer to Overwhelming Barrage, or insert whatever card messes you up here, right? I think Obi just... a lot of people like mentioning that card, so I'll just throw it in there. But that's my issue with the leader ability. The unit is actually quite powerful. That effect is strong, being able to like Bazine your opponent on attack. That's really nice on a 5-flip leader. Slightly understated, right? It's a 3/6, has that raid 1, so it's like a 3.5/6, which, is okay. It's not fantastic when you can get one shot by like Plo Koons, and when Kira flip attack into you doesn't trade, it just kills you, things like that. But it's not bad stats. Let's just say it's not bad stats. And it's a very powerful leader ability. It's going to be pretty disruptive. I think this can be an annoying deck, and you certainly will brick some opponents, particularly with her unit, not so much her leader ability, but sometimes in conjunction with one another. And, where would I see a deck like this flourishing the most? Probably in a mono yellow shell. And then you have to ask yourself, is that better than just playing Han 1? And I do bring up a lot of leaders in this review that are going to rotate out in 4 months, but they're not rotated out yet. So I do expect some leaders are going to become way more playable once we get rotation. There's still some kind of, let's not say overpowered, but like pushed leaders from the first year and the first 3 sets, and a lot is going to change when they're no longer the like default versions for all the decks we're talking about. So Sabe, keep an eye out on her. It can definitely be pretty annoying. I'm not sure it's quite there yet, but we'll see. Next up is Cassian. I alluded to him earlier when I talked about Luthen. So, he is a pretty interesting new leader. The leader ability that, like, whenever you attack a base with a unit, they can't attack back. It's actually, like, stronger than I thought it would be at first. It can be pretty annoying. If you manage initiative well, you can kind of always protect one of your units, and often your opponent's like, okay, I could trade here, but I can't actually attack your units. It's pretty frustrating, and you can kind of build up a board that way. I wouldn't say it's like a ton of value, but it's certainly a nice upside. It's also like you don't have to do anything. It's just free. It's always happening. His unit, I mean, he hits for 6. He only has 2 health, and he has this whole, like, if you have initiative, I can't die thing. It's decent. It's, like, especially good if you can do something with Cinta and Cassian, where you can just, like, you have initiative, you hit for 6, you claim immediately, right? This doesn't die to card effects either. It's not just damage, so like hard removal, shrink effects, nothing's going to kill it while you have initiative. The problem is everything kills it when you don't. It's a completely useless leader if you ever don't have initiative. And if he ever has damage on him, even if you have initiative, your opponent can immediately claim and he will instantly die. So there's a lot of tension in like how you manage his whole game. Where's the problem? The problem is there's just no way he's better than Sabine. Like, I'm sorry. Right now, I give it a less than like 10% chance that he can supplant her as the premier aggro red hero. And that's all he can do. There is zero you can do with this other than slam base. Nothing works with this leader unless all you're doing is going face with every unit you have every turn, and then going face with him once he flips. This is like the whole thing, right? It's just spelled out for you. It says it on the card when they attack base. Base, 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 base. So why would I do a 6 flip when I can do that exact same strategy with a 4 flip leader? I see very little reason to. And that's why he's in the maybe, because honestly, he's a decent leader. He's just in the wrong color currently. So probably this is a revisit in 4 months situation. And the last in tier maybe, who I initially had 1 tier higher than this, but I'll explain a little bit why I knocked him down. But this is Dryden. This is another really cool leader. Ambush on a stick is just really powerful. Now, it comes with a pretty massive deck building cost. You need not only good 5 and less cost units that work well with ambush, you also need an abundance of 6+ cost cards to trigger it, and it leads sometimes into wrong half of deck situation, and that's like really why I knocked him down a tier. Is like you draw the wrong ambush unit at the wrong time, or you don't have the expensive card, or you have to hold the expensive card instead of resourcing just so you could trigger an ambush, but then you ended up having to resource a card that you might need. It's like a lot of like weirdness in that kind of sometimes feels like you're like almost there, but like you're held back by something. Powerful things I think you can do with this. Look at blue, either non-force or force, but with force, you get to ambush Talzin's assassin on curve, which is actually kind of crazy. You don't even need other force units is the thing. You just, because when they ambush, they give you the force, and then you can use the ability. So Talzin's assassin could attack something for 4, get the force, and then give something -3/-3. The Degoyan master, the 5/5 that lets you search the top of your deck for a force unit when played and when defeated. Even if you don't have the force on that ambush, you can then draw a card. It's really great with Dryden because he's discarding cards pretty frequently. He's also a really free enabler for Anakin Legendary because you can splash heroic cards that are expensive, discard them to give other things ambush, and then bam, they're in your discard pile for Anakin. And you get even more value out of Palp's Return now, because not only do you get your villain units cheaper, but you can get your heroic splashed cards on rate with Palp's Return, right? Luke costs 7 when you bring him back with Palp's Return. That's pretty powerful. So blue is nice. I think you can look at mono green too. You get a lot more ramp. A really good card in this deck is Chancellor Valorum because you can ambush it and ramp immediately. The biggest downside that Chancellor had was he did nothing when you played him, but that changes. And then you get command as well, so you can really fight up that curve. And a card that you can just kind of play in Dryden in any situation, I think, is Nihilus. Darth Nihilus. A card that I thought was kind of bulk before Dryden was revealed. I think is just really good with Dryden, because the thing about Nihilus is he's kind of crazy when he ambushes on curve, and the only place you could do that is with Dryden, because you can flip Dryden and ambush Nihilus immediately. He's also just another 7-cost force unit that can get Palps returned early, so he kind of works really well there. So you'll have to manage a curve, an early game suite of units that are good to ambush on 3, 4, and 5. Maybe like think of 4/4s on the ground. They're pretty good turn 2 ambushers. Look at some of the space units, maybe like the 3/3s on for 3 that can kill smaller space units, devastating gunship, things like that. But you'll need like both halves of the arena covered. You'll need like your costs managed. It's a little tricky, and you can, while you play with Dryden, you see some games where you just like obliterate because you curve really well on the correct ambushers, and some where you just like don't have the right unit and you just fall so far behind. This is also a deck that I think might not even play many turn 1 plays. Play like Dr. Pershing in blue, play like Mazameda in mono green, but maybe that's it. Maybe you just save that extra card so that on turn 2 you can immediately ambush and stay on card parity and get continue like your value train rolling from there. So the only thing I guess I didn't mention is his unit. 5/7. It's not great for a 7 flip. It needs to be good enough to like let you ambush once, usually. Like if you can flip him and ambush a 7 cost, or if you can play your 7 cost ambusher first, flip him and then claim and immediately get to ambush something like a reinforcement walker, then you're feeling really good. But if you're not able to get a good ambush off, it can sometimes be problematic. And now we're up to tier probably. This only has 2, and they fall on pretty different extremes. We got a 4 cost and a 7 cost here, and we'll start with Dedra, 4 cost aggression leader, and Villainy finally found a 4 cost leader that has 5 health, right? And that can attack for 4, which is actually even more than Sabine does, right? Sabine is kind of that 3/5 for 4. Dedra can do more as long as you kind of maneuver your hand appropriately. I think Dedra, at first I wasn't sure if her leader ability would be good in an aggro shell. Of course, she's a 4 cost leader that, hits hard, but I wasn't sure if it would like gel, right? Spending a resource, potentially not even impacting the board when your opponent just lets you draw. Turns out it's actually pretty decent. A lot of the 2-drops that you can play in the Dedra deck are actually really strong. So underdropping on turn 2 with her ability is good. It helps fuel the rest of the deck, helps make sure that you'll be able to get that raid if they, let you draw, find more reach, whatever it may be. If they're letting you do damage, if you're in a Tarkentown deck, you got your free kill right there. Otherwise, likely any trade they may be making into your deck will now just evenly trade instead of being a trade up for your opponent. So there's nice value in both halves of that. And even on turn 4, often the best things you can do are plot. A really good plot with her is actually Sudden Ferocity, which costs 3. So there you go. You've got another 1 resource to do on that 3rd turn to kind of action churn with her a little bit. So it's just been a decent ability. But the best stuff here is obviously you're flipping early, you're hitting for enormous amounts of damage with her, right? No other 4 flip other than Kylo, I believe, could hit for that hard. And Kylo's 4 health was a major liability in a lot of cases. And of course, he was much more all in because you often flip and have like no hand left by the time you do it. And with Dedra, you'll have a hand, you'll be able to keep deploying units the rest of the game, get to the point where you might draw into some reach effects, which, exist in a variety of places, right? You got the Smuggle, Reckless Gunslinger, you can play Ruthless Raiders, in mono red, you can play Chaos of War. Green has a lot of interesting things too, because you get some really good plot cards like Jar Jar, Chancellor Palpatine. You get Unveiled Might, which, may or may not be as good as Sudden Ferocity, TBD, but you have that option as well. So lots of things you can do there. I've also even seen potential here for like a hard control deck with blue, where you're basically just using this ability to either like slowly kill units or fuel your hand, and you've got this cheap leader that can come out and maybe get you a trade. And that's all you're really trying to do here is just like you have a card control leader that's maybe drawing you some cards and getting some value. Very similar to what like Bosk would do in a hard control shell, where like the leader's main focus is just like getting you extra cards off of like Deathmark or heal off of top target. Well, here your leader's main job is to like get you a value trade maybe, and then like get you incremental value throughout the course of the game. I see a decent amount of potential here. I see a lot of potential to post rotation. I think a lot of the like early ground aggro stuff is going to shift away, especially when Sabine is gone. And I think Dedra can kind of last there. And, you know, this may be the most absurd aggressive negotiations that you can make, just because you're trying extra cards a lot of the time, you're plotting early, and you have this really beefy 4-cost leader. So it's a non-zero amount of times you're going to flip this, play like Sudden Ferocity from your row, hit for 7 that turn, claim, skip a resource, and then do like an aggressive negotiations that hits for like +5, +6, maybe do 12, 13. In like 2 actions, you can do about 20 damage with a sequence like that. And it's really, really powerful against a lot of different archetypes. And aggressive negotiations is not like a Dedra exclusive thing. It just works particularly well. But pretty cool to see Villain get its own version maybe of like a Sabine style 4-flip aggressively statted aggro shell. That also has potential for control. And the last one here is Chancellor Palpatine, and this is like the reverse, right? This is a 7-flip value town sort of deck. Has a really powerful leader ability. This is a 1-cost draw a lot of the time. You do need to fill your deck full of plot. I don't think that's so difficult. There's a lot of really good plot cards. Some of them are even good on curve, like Jar Jar, for instance, can create trades. Cad Bane is sometimes decent just as 5-cost out of hand. Mazameda, if you're playing with officials, is a card that you can play before your plot turn. And, you know, there's more as well, but you fill your deck full of them, and now this ability will be on a ton, and it really lets you just kind of free roll. And that's pretty powerful. It's a ton of value because we haven't seen like 1-cost, it's just 1-cost draw, right? Like a lot of the other draw effect leaders require something to happen in game. And here, nothing has to happen in game. You just have to build your deck a certain way. So that's a really powerful effect. Now, it's not a particularly good effect against aggressive decks, so it's not like you get to do this all the time. You have to combat aggression in some way. But you have a crazy flip turn. For anyone who's played Kylo in the previous set, Legends of the Force Kylo, knows like this 7-flip, do this tremendous value play. And that's what you got here. It's just different, but it's actually very similar in style, right? You're creating a mega flip turn. You get to play 10 resources immediately, right? This is 1 action. That's the crazy part here, is that you don't, even if you had like 10 resources to play, you usually would need like 4 actions just to play all the cards, an action to flip your leader. You do this all at once, and it's like crazy what you actually see happen on board. You flip this 6/8, you like play Chancellor Palpatine that makes 3 units, 2 of them have Sentinels. You put Jar Jar, you make this guy an 8/10. You Cad Bane and kill a unit. And like all of a sudden you have what? 5 units in play minimum from that. You have an 8/10 that's ready to attack. And like a lot of time, the idea there becomes go base and like just race, because this leader's very chunky. Like 6 attack is a lot on a 7-flip leader. You don't see that very often. And he has enough health to support it, especially when you can get buffs with Jar Jar. You get buffing with Mazameda, who's also a plot card. So it's just, this is like a control deck for sure, but it plays a lot different than what you've maybe grown accustomed to with like blue-green villain control, because this is not necessarily trying to grind much past that flip turn. I do think you probably would end up including like some capital ships just to like, once the dust is settled, you have that top end. But in a lot of ways, you're trying to just win the game off of that flip turn in what off of all that value. If your opponent at any point has to become defensive against that, it's going to take them so long to catch up, and that's when like your big capital ships like Avenger and Devastator might be able to take over. But against a lot of decks, you probably don't even get to that point. You're just trying to close out with this leader. And, I don't know if this will work. I'm hopeful that this will like kind of be cool enough to play with and competitive enough to play with. I don't rank these two leaders here all the way at the top in tier, probably just because I'm like certain that this will be like a tier 1 deck. I just think it has a lot of potential to be one, and it certainly is a very interesting style of deck. Excited to play with these. I've been testing with both these leaders. I think they're both very, very good, and that's why they're here. All right, so if you've been counting, probably knew this already, but yes, no leader once again in tier. Yes, I just was not comfortable enough to take that stand. The closest I got were with the 2 tier probablys. I guess you could say everything upshifts because of that, and they are my tier yes, and that's fine. But yeah, I wasn't as sold on any leader in this set. I do in fact think the overall leaders in this set are not as pushed as we may have seen in some other sets. Maybe post-rotation, a lot more of them will have a shot. But right now, I think it looks like a solid set. There's certainly a lot of powerful cards that we got towards the end of spoiler season. The leaders, though, it may be the shortcoming or the bigger shortcoming in the set. But still, a lot of time left to figure it all out. Maybe some will be elevated into top tier competitive play, and I will regret not including them in a tier yes, but it is what it is. It's how I feel right now. So that's all I got. Let me know what you think of the video. Let me know what leaders you're interested in building in. Building with. Let me know what leaders you think aren't particularly strong. Interested to hear it all. And until next time, take care.